It's the evening of November 28th, 1942. You're stepping through a revolving door into a world of warmth and noise and music. The air smells of cigarette smoke and perfume and something sweet, the tropical drinks they're famous for here. Above you, the ceiling is draped with cloth meant to look like a canopy of palm trees. The club is packed, far beyond its legal capacity. Every table is full, every bar stool taken. People are pressed shoulder to shoulder in the downstairs Melody Lounge, laughing, leaning in close to hear each other over the music. You can barely move, but no one seems to mind. Tonight, Boston is celebrating. You don't know it yet, but within the hour, nearly half the people in this room will be dead. And the way they die will change fire safety codes, emergency medicine, and burn treatment across the world. Hina Anderson and changes still in place today. This is the story of the Cocoanut Grove. By late 1942, the United States had been at war for nearly a year. Boston, like every American city, was living under the shadow of the conflict. Young men were shipping out from the harbor. Families were rationing sugar and gasoline. The news from the Pacific and North Africa was grim and uncertain. In times like these, nightclubs thrived. They offered a few hours of forgetting, a place where the war felt far away. And the Cocoanut Grove at 17 Piedmont Street in Boston's Bay Village neighborhood was the most popular nightclub in the city. It had been open since 1927, passing through several owners. By 1942, the club was controlled by Barnett Wolanski, a lawyer with deep connections to Boston's political establishment. Under his ownership, the club had expanded. New lounges added, new bars opened, without always obtaining the proper permits or meeting fire safety codes. The Cocoanut Grove was designed to transport its guests. The walls of the Melody Lounge were covered in imitation leather. Fabric was draped from the ceilings to resemble a tropical paradise. Artificial palm trees with real coconut husks lined the rooms. Paper and cloth decorations hung everywhere. Almost none of it had been treated with flame retardant. The decorations were, in effect, kindling, and the building itself was a maze, a warren of rooms connected by narrow hallways, many with low ceilings. Several exits had been bolted shut or concealed behind curtains to prevent patrons from leaving without paying their tabs. The main entrance was a single revolving door. There were other exits, but some were locked, others were hidden, and at least one opened inward against the crush of a crowd trying to escape. The legal capacity of the club was approximately 460 people. On the night of November 28th, an estimated 1,000 were inside that Saturday evening. Many in the crowd had come from the Boston College Holy Cross football game at Fenway Park. Boston College, ranked number 1 in the country, had been expected to win easily. Instead, they lost 55-12, a stunning upset. Some BC players and fans had planned victory celebrations at the Cocoanut Grove. Many canceled. Those who didn't joined an already overflowing club. Among the crowd were soldiers on leave, couples on dates, families celebrating. A young couple were there to mark their wedding anniversary. Buck Jones, a well-known cowboy film star, was hosting a dinner in one of the private rooms upstairs. The singer and comedian Mickey Alpert was performing on the main stage. At approximately 10:15 p.m., in the basement Melody Lounge, someone unscrewed a light bulb near a corner booth. Perhaps a patron seeking a little more privacy in the dark. A 16-year-old busboy named Stanley Tomaszewski was asked by a bartender to screw the bulb back in. It was too dark to see. Stanley lit a match to find the socket. He replaced the bulb and shook the match out. Moments later, a small flame appeared in the artificial palm tree near where he had been standing. Accounts differ on whether the match started the fire, Investigators later suggested the cause may have been faulty wiring, but the result was the same. A bartender tried to put it out with a seltzer bottle. A patron swatted at it with his hand. But the flame climbed the fabric of the palm tree with startling speed, leaping to the cloth ceiling, racing across the draped decorations overhead. Within seconds, the entire ceiling of the Melody Lounge was on fire. What happened next was catastrophically fast. The fire traveled from the Melody Lounge up the stairway to the ground floor in approximately 2 to 3 minutes. Witnesses described a rolling ball of flame that moved across the ceiling faster than a person could run. The superheated gases ignited everything they touched. In the main dining room, the band was mid-song. The lights went out. For a moment, there was silence. Then the screaming began. A fireball swept across the main room, incinerating the decorations and filling the space with thick, black, toxic smoke. Many of the dead would later be found not burned but asphyxiated, killed by the poisonous gases released from the burning imitation leather and fabric before they could reach any exit. Hundreds of people rushed toward the exits simultaneously. At the main entrance, the revolving door jammed almost immediately. Bodies pressed against it from both sides, locking it in place. People were crushed against the glass panels. Some shattered them and crawled through. Most could not. Other exits were locked. One door on Shawmut Street had been welded shut. Another door near the new cocktail lounge opened inward and could not be pushed open against the tide of panicking bodies. Some patrons found a side exit through a basement window. Others stumbled through a kitchen and out a service door. These were the lucky ones. Outside, passersby and taxi drivers began pulling survivors from windows. The Boston Fire Department received the alarm at 10:20 p.m. and arrived within minutes. But by the time they forced open the doors, they found bodies stacked 5 and 6 deep in the doorways. People who had been within feet of open air and could not reach it. Boston City Hospital and Massachusetts General Hospital were overwhelmed within the hour. Ambulances, taxis, delivery trucks, and private cars brought the injured in waves. Many victims arrived with no visible burns. They had inhaled superheated air and toxic fumes, and their lungs were damaged beyond repair. Doctors and nurses worked through the night. The scale of burn injuries was unlike anything most had seen. At Massachusetts General, a young surgeon named Oliver Cope began experimenting with new approaches to burn treatment, wrapping wounds in gauze coated with petroleum jelly rather than applying the standard tannic acid treatment, which was proving harmful. In the chaos, another breakthrough emerged. Merck and Company rushed supplies of penicillin, rewritten, then a rare experimental drug, to Boston for use on the burn victims. It was one of the first large-scale civilian uses of the antibiotic in American history, and its success helped accelerate its mass production for the war effort. By dawn on November 29th, the scope of the disaster was becoming clear. 492 people were dead. Many had been killed within the first 5 minutes. Hundreds more were critically injured, and dozens of those would die in the days and weeks that followed, bringing some estimates of the final toll closer to 500. Temporary morgues were set up in garages and film studios near the site. Families gathered outside waiting for news. Identification was slow and agonizing. Many of the dead had no identification on them, and some were burned beyond recognition. Buck Jones, the cowboy actor, was among the dead. He survived the initial fire, but succumbed to his injuries 2 days later. The investigation that followed revealed a cascade of negligence. Fire exits locked or blocked. Flammable decorations with no fire retardant. No sprinkler system. No fire alarm. A building that had been expanded without proper inspection. And a capacity exceeded by more than double on the night of the fire. Barnett Wilansky, the club's owner, was charged with involuntary manslaughter. He had been in the hospital with a heart condition on the night of the fire and was not present at the club. But investigators found that he had personally ordered exit doors locked and bolted. He was convicted in 1943 and sentenced to 12 to 15 years in prison. Stanley Tomaszewski, the 16-year-old busboy who had lit the match, was never charged. Investigators concluded that even if his match had started the fire, the conditions inside the club made a catastrophe inevitable. The true cause was not a single flame. It was every decision that had made the building a trap. The Cocoanut Grove fire transformed fire safety law in the United States. Within months, new codes were adopted across the country. Exit doors were required to open outward. Revolving doors in public buildings were required to have conventional doors flanking them. Maximum occupancy limits were enforced with new rigor. Sprinkler systems and clearly marked, illuminated exit signs became mandatory. The medical lessons were equally profound. Dr. Cope's work on burn treatment at Massachusetts General became the foundation of modern burn care. The successful use of penicillin on Cocoanut Grove survivors helped convince the U.S. government to fund its mass production. And studies of the survivors' psychological trauma contributed to the early understanding of what would later be called post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrist Eric Lindemann, who treated the bereaved families of the victims, published a landmark 1944 study on grief, one of the first systematic examinations of the mourning process. His work at Massachusetts General became a cornerstone of modern grief counseling and crisis intervention. The site of the Cocoanut Grove was demolished. Today, the location at what was 17 Piedmont Street in Boston is a parking structure and a small hotel. A modest plaque marks the spot. Most people who walk past it do not stop to read it. But the legacy of that night is written into the architecture of every public building you have ever entered. Every time you see a lit exit sign above a door, every time you push open a door that swings outward into the night, every time a fire marshal counts the heads in a crowded room. The Cocoanut Grove is there, quietly, in the code. 492 people walked into a nightclub on a cold November evening in 1942. They were celebrating, mourning a football loss, marking an anniversary, escaping the war for a few hours. They were ordinary people doing an ordinary thing. And the world they left behind was made safer, not by foresight, but by the terrible clarity that comes only after catastrophe.